Because without respect, you're not a man, you're a piece of...
Draw the blood.
This is our life. This is how things are in the Cosa Nostra.
We've never, as Irishmen, sat down and took an oath. We don't do that. We just honor amongst men. I mean, we didn't rat on each other.
Before Valachi, there was nobody talked. They'd rather take a bullet or a baseball bat in their head.
Double-crossing, double-dealing, violence up to and including murder.
All the people in our own crew started to disappear. You know, it wasn't like when they ran out of people to kill, they started killing each other.
I knew my days were numbered. He was not going to allow me to go on and have this over his head.
If you're a member of La Cosa Nostra, the only way you could get out, that's what they tell you, is his feet first.
Get that guy, Copper! Hey, look it. They got machine guns you can carry.
By the mid-century, American mobsters are as famous as the movie stars who play them. Men like Al Capone, Bugsy Siegel, and Lucky Luciano are not only gangsters, they're legends. Hollywood turned them into movie stars. The reality is very different. Extortion, numbers, murder. Life on the street is still a deadly business. Drugs will make it a dirty business. This is the story of three men who grew up in that life, with those old codes of honor, of loyalties, and saw them betrayed.
I was too into sports. That was my whole life, was football and baseball. As a matter of fact, out of high school, I had a football scholarship. And at that time, I didn't have the aspirations to be anybody big in the family because all I wanted to do was make a lot of money. My uncle, Nino, was probably my biggest role model. His one dream in life was to die in the street with a gun in his hand. You know, and if that's not being proud of being a gangster, you know, Nino's the kind of guy that could walk into a restaurant and everybody will look up and go, look at the gangster. You know, I mean, he did what we used to call wearing it, and he wore it 24 hours a day. You know, I mean, if you saw him in his bathrobe, he was wearing it. He'd have the dark glasses on, he'd have the bathrobe on, and it was him. He didn't change.
Dominick Montiglio grew up in the 50s in Levittown, Long Island. His godfather, Nino Gaggi, was an up-and-coming soldier in the Gambino crime family. Uncle Nino became Don's surrogate father. Taught him lessons he couldn't learn in school.
He made me resign being the class president because part of your duties were when the teacher was out of the room, when there was assemblies and stuff, you had to write who the bad people were, who was talking out, and, you know, while the teacher was out of the room and stuff like that. And he said, well, what you're telling me is you're a stool pigeon, and we can't have a stool pigeon in our family. So go back and tell the teacher tomorrow you can't be the class president. I just had to resign. I felt like I was starting to learn about my family.
My uncle told me to be a man of honor, to be a man of respect. You know, we have to live this life. This is our life, he told me, you know. This is the way we live. We don't trust the government. We don't live by their laws. We have our own set of laws we live by. From when I was a kid, you know, my relationship with my uncle, he told me the right path to take, which I believed him and I followed him and I listened to him and he got me involved with the La Cosa Nostra.
Phil Leonetti's uncle, Little Nicky Scarfo, the scariest hood in Philadelphia, shot his way to the top of the Bruno crime family. He left so many bodies behind the cops lost count. Nicky taught Phil the ropes.
He made sure every murder we did in Atlantic City took less than 1 week. He wanted to have that reputation. He always said he loved that movie Scarface with Paul Muni.
There's only one thing that gets orders and gives orders, and this is it. That's how I got the south side for you, and that's how I'm going to get the north side for you.
where Paul Muni had the machine gun. He says, you got to keep using it, and you got to keep killing people.
Get out of my way, Johnny. I'm gonna...
You got to use this, he said, and you got to keep using it, and you got to keep killing. That was his philosophy. You got to keep killing people. But he asked me one time, he said, look, if I told you to shoot Spike, would you shoot him? I looked at him, I said, now I know Spike. I grew up with Spike, and he was a funny guy, and he was a real good friend. Like, we really liked Spike, you know? I said, yeah. I told him, if you told me to do it, I would do it. He said, good. He says, not that, there's no problem with Spike, but I just wanted to see what you had to say. This is our life. This is how things are in the Cosa Nostra. It could be our brother, but if he does something wrong, he has to pay the penalty.
My father, he wasn't abusive in the sense that he didn't sit and read. I mean, he never read a book to me, you know. What do you mean you can't read that? Crack, I was knocked off the table. What do you mean you didn't get your homework done? You know, you were banged. I mean, I've been knocked out probably only by my father that I've ever been knocked out. And I've been in more fights than you've got toes and fingers. Not taking away from my father, he did work hard for a living, but he was a criminal. He did things under the table, we'll say, that he shouldn't have done. And I learned all the shortcuts, and I'd rather go the short route than the long route. I mean, anybody can go break a sweat. You know, if I could do it without breaking a sweat, that would give me that much time to play pool, drink, or drugs, or whatever I wished.
Billy Beatty grew up in Hell's Kitchen on the west side of New York. He fell in with the Westies, a small-time crew of Irish hoods who terrorized the city.
My father is a Scotch Protestant. My mother's an Irish Catholic. How they got together is unbeknownst to me. These people have been fighting for 800 years, but they did. And we were raised Catholic. And my father told me before I left home when I was 14 that you're old enough to figure out what you want now for yourself. But I was an altar boy. I mean, I could get into reciting the Catholic Mass here in Latin. I mean, I was that good at it. You know, I got into it. But then I learned real quick to work the weddings. Because if you hustled the weddings, you got the groom. You didn't want to jinx his wedding. It'd tip you well, you know. So we got into hustling that pretty good. I worked mostly weddings. My mother thought I had a calling to be a priest. She didn't know it was a busy signal. She sent me to one of these monasteries and said, Mom, I can't deal with this. Everybody was out there playing pocket pool.
Came to Atlantic City. And he told me, he says, I want you to take a ride with me. I said, all right, we want to go to Philadelphia. I said, okay. So he walks me around. He had a pickup truck hidden somewhere in the neighborhood. And he was saying, look, I need you to come with me because it doesn't look as too suspicious with me and a young boy with me, you know, just in case I get stopped by the police for, you know, it looks like nothing could be going on here. And as we were driving on our way to Philadelphia, he told me what happened about this fella who he just killed. And they used this pickup truck to dump him off at a hole to bury the guy. And now he had to bring this pickup truck back to Philadelphia so somebody could get in and chop it up so there's no evidence. I said, oh, that's really good. You know, that I seen everybody back then, they were working together as a family to kill this person who was bad, who disrespected the family. And I thought that was great. You know what I felt like? That girl Marilyn in the Monsters, like she's normal and she lives with the Monsters and all that, but she don't think anything's wrong with them. That's how I felt. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong here. I know what they are, but you know, what's wrong? And we go on with everyday life until I got involved. You know, they needed me, and I got involved. I would never let my family down.
We stayed mostly with our own. We trusted nobody, and very few of our own did we really trust. I mean, the inner circle people we trusted, like, you know, these were people to be looked up at because they did the right thing by us people. I mean, the guys that are now called criminals or murderers were paying a lot of rents in our neighborhood. They were good guys, you know. If we had a problem, we went to them. We didn't go to the police department. You were a stool pigeon, you know. You went to the tough guy in the neighborhood and he straightened it out.
Like, we're not crazed killers, or I didn't think we were at that time. We wouldn't go out and kill little kids or things like that. We would kill people that disrespected our family and disrespected members of our family. And I thought that was good. I felt like, yeah, that's good. There's nothing wrong in that. I mean, we're respectable people. We help other Italian people if we could.
I became a criminal, and probably by choice. I mean, I'd like to say I was a product of what I was born into, but I really don't believe that. I think people come out of my neighborhood, and some of them did really good for themselves. I could have took that path. I know now, and I didn't. I took the easy way.
I always told my uncle, the only reason I'm involved in this life is because of you. And if you weren't around, I'm not looking to be no boss, I'm not looking to take over. He said, no, you got to keep this thing going. If I die, you got to keep this going, the Cosa Nostra. He was into it. That's him. That's his life.
I saw the gradual ascent or descent, however you want to look at it, of my uncle, because every time we'd go to Brooklyn, there'd be another new car and there'd be more new clothes, and we'd go once a week, and he'd always give me 100 at the door when I was leaving to go back out, to go home. So I knew he was doing good, but I never really paid much attention to that life at that time. I think the first time I noticed was when I was about 10, and the family realignment, so to speak, was happening. Frank Scalish was murdered, Joe Scalish was murdered, Albert Anastasia was murdered, all in a fairly short period of time.
These murders are the first shots fired in a war for control of two of America's most powerful crime families, a war that would change the mob forever. Uncle Nino will be a soldier in this battle. Dom's fortunes will rise or fall with his uncle's. It begins in the fall of 1957. It will end in 1963 with the biggest betrayal in mob history.
You do solemnly swear that the evidence you should give before this Senate subcommittee shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God.
Yes, sir.
Is it true that you're the head of the mafia in this country? It is not the truth.
Well, sir, have you ever been connected with the mafia at any time?
Never.
What about...
Genovese is right. He's not the head of the mafia. Just wants to be. The number 2 guy in the Luciano crime family, he makes his move. A grab for power, the worst thing he could have done. Vito's first mistake? Trying to whack the family's prime minister, Frank Costello.
Who was a Broadway gossip columnist, is having dinner with Frank Costello, who was then essentially the chairman of the board of the American Mafia, in a restaurant called Monsignor in the East 50s. And my father drops Costello off at the Majestic Apartments on Central Park West, and he gets out of the car and he drives away. And as my father's driving home, he hears on the radio, mob boss Frank Costello has been shot in the head in the lobby of the Majestic Apartments. And it's like the brakes go on, the U-turn goes off. It says he's been rushed to Roosevelt Hospital. And you see the black and white pictures of Costello, the white handkerchief to his head, the fedora split along the brim from the bullet, which creased his hat and grazed his skull. And you're like, who would have made a move on Frank Costello? That's a pretty big move.
Now Vito's in trouble. He's got to do something, quick. Albert Anastasia, the man known as the Lord High Executioner for Murder Incorporated and Frank Costello's ally, is the next big shot on Vito's hit list. But first, he's got to take out Albert's underboss, Frank Scalish.
Frank Scalish, he was my second cousin. He was Albert Anastasia's underboss in the Mangano family. Before Albert had Vincent Mangano made to disappear, he made him do the Houdini, and Albert took over the family.
25th, 1957. Death took the executioner today. Albert Anastasia, once the boss of Murder Incorporated, was himself executed while getting his hair cut at a swank Midtown hotel. Coming on the heels of the attempt on Frank Costello's life, police fear gangland war. Detectives round up known mobsters for questioning.
To most New Yorkers, Albert Anastasia's hit is just another headline. But inside the Montiglio house, it's a whole other story.
I wasn't allowed to go out of the house to go to school. And, I mean, everyone stayed in the house. Except Nino. But we had all the doors double locked and bolts put on everything. And I knew something was up because, I mean, I still was privy to the TV and the radio. So you heard the names of the people that you knew were your relatives that were missing and dying and being assassinated. And that went on for a couple of weeks. And then all of a sudden one day it was boom. Okay, everybody can go out again. And all of a sudden Nino went from driving an old black Chevy to a brand new gold Cadillac. So I knew we were on our way to something. I knew something for all the bad that happened and all the crying and all the mourning. I knew something good came of it.
After Anastasia's murder, Frank Costello gets the hint. He retires, taking with him the judges, politicians, businessmen, labor leaders, prosecutors, and cops he has in his pocket. The new boss will never have Costello's clout. He can kill you, but he can't fix a parking ticket. Who's the new boss? Vito Genovese.
Vito Genovese was taken over the Luciano family from Costello, and Albert Anastasia being removed, Carlo Gambino is becoming the head of the family. Vito Genovese decided that although the commission had held a regularly scheduled meeting only 1 year prior, he wanted a special meeting.
Police got their first break when they stumbled upon a Mafia Board of Directors meeting in upstate New York. The result was that authorities, including former FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, could no longer deny the existence of organized crime.
The incident that put our squad in business like forever was on November 14th, 1957. A state trooper sergeant with a few helpers discovered more than 100 people assembled from all parts of the United States, Northern California, Southern California, Florida, Ohio, Illinois, Arizona, Colorado, New England, and that raised 1,000 questions. What's going on here? And Vito Genovese was never forgiven for that mistake. The one meeting held out of context was the one that was discovered and brought them so much grief and headaches.
The nation's underworld gets the unwelcome spotlight of publicity as the Senate's Investigations Subcommittee begins new hearings on crime. Arkansas Senator McClelland is at the helm.
Genovese's dopey meeting is only the first in a whole series of disasters. Within months, the McClelland Committee issues a report on the mob's influence in organized labor. A few months later, a triumphant Fidel Castro comes to power and closes all their casinos in Cuba. On top of all of that, Bobby Kennedy becomes Attorney General and orders the FBI, once and for all, to get serious about the mob. J. Edgar Hoover, for reasons of his own, had pretty much left the mob alone for decades. But Kennedy insists. His special target? Teamster boss Jimmy Hoffa. Finally, in 1962, Lucky Luciano, the mob's last link to its golden days, dies on his way to the airport to meet a Hollywood producer wanting to make a movie of his life. It's the end of an era. But all these problems are small potatoes compared to Vito's next fiasco.
We have as our first witness today, Joseph Valachi, who is presently in the custody.
Joe Valachi, a two-bit hood in the Genovese crime family, becomes the first mob guy to betray the traditional code of silence. Why? The threat of life in prison and the paranoid fear that Vito doesn't like him and is going to have him whacked. By the time he's done, the Boy Scouts have more secrets than the mob.
You do solemnly swear that the evidence you should give before this Senate subcommittee shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So have you done it. Be seated.
Valachi was the start of the end, I guess you could say. The beginning of the end. They gave him a good deal, and he squealed. He ratted. He fingered a lot of people. He started the ball rolling.
Can you name some of the Costello Monets in New York that I met? That's right. Joe Gavard, Joe Banana. Joe Banana is the boss of one of the families now. Is that right? Yes. Joe Profarch was formerly boss of the Maglioka family. Right. All right. Who else?
Years ago, there was no such thing like that. Valachi opened up the door to that. Before Valachi, there was nobody talked. They'd rather take a bullet or a baseball bat in their head.
You honestly believe that they were under orders from Genovese to kill you there in prison?
Yes, 100%, Senator. 100%.
100%. How many members of the Cosa Nostra was present there at that time?
About, as I said, I can go up to about 7.
Valachi's testimony is the talk of the town. He acts out the sacred blood oath in Italian for a bunch of Southern senators who don't have a clue what he's talking about. Only 3 words stick: La, Cosa, and Nostra.
What I'm telling you, what I'm exposing to you and the press and everybody, this is my doom. This is the promise I'm breaking. That even if I talk, I should never talk about this, and I'm doing so. That's my best way.
If you were to pick only one thing that changed the mob forever, this would be it.
Tonight we
That's the Four Directions. That was the singing group. We opened up for Little Anthony and the Imperials, the Drifters. I mean, it wasn't a half-assed group. We recorded on Decca Records. We were on 13 television shows. We did albums with Mitch Ryder. All I needed was a kick from my uncle to get it, you know. And he wouldn't do it because he says it was a dirty business. Yeah. I couldn't understand that. Pornography was a clean business, you know, but singing was a dirty business. I had that argument with him. I said it's all right to kill people, but not to sing.
Well, come on, all of you big, strong men. Uncle Sam needs your help again. Yeah, he's got himself in a terrible jam. Way down yonder in Vietnam. So put down your books and pick up a gun. We're gonna have a whole lot of fun. And it's 1, and it's 5, 6, 7. Open up the pearly gates. Well, there ain't no time to wonder why. We're all gonna die.
When I joined the Green Berets, I went over to my Uncle Nino's house. And it was in the evening. And I walked in all proud and, you know, figuring I was going to go save the world from communism. And I told him I had joined the Green Berets, and it was like a top elite, you know, fighting unit in the Army. And he just sat down in a chair, and he just looked at me and he goes, "Boy, you are an idiot." He says, "I always thought you were an idiot, but you are an idiot." And I said, "What?" He says, "You don't die for these politicians, and you don't die for generals. You die for us. You die for your family." And I said, "Well, that's all fine and dandy, but I'm leaving in 2 days, you know, and I'll see you whenever I get back."
Right after I turned 17, a couple of months later, I was almost killed by some guys that tried to mug me and my friends. And they were shooting at us in the street. They tried to rob us. They pulled guns on us. And I hit one in the face with a Coke bottle.
In a few years, Mickey Featherstone will trade a Coke bottle for a gun. He'll become a homicidal maniac, a hitman for the mob. But in 1967, he was just another kid in trouble looking to get out.
I've been trying to get my mother and father to let me go in the Army at the time, and they weren't letting me do it. That incident there got them to give me permission to join. Shooting electricity through their body, tying them to trees upside down by their feet, pouring swamp water down their nostrils, and
So there was 2 guys pleading for their lives, the Viet Cong, and with their hands bound, and I guess they were praying or pleading, I don't know. And the guy, he looked at the commander, and the commander says, "Shoot him." He said, Billy, I just arrived. This guy made me blow both their... These guys asking me for their lives. I blew both their heads off. He said, after that, it came easy, you know.
I was ashamed for being in Vietnam. And when I became a street guy, when I come home and did the things I did, and then got involved with the Westies later, when I think about it now, it was like a suicide wish. I wouldn't kill myself, but somebody would eventually have killed me.
My specialty was mainly light weapons. I was a light weapons man on the team. So I handled all the sniping. A lot of booby traps. I think the military prepared me more for going back to Brooklyn than Brooklyn prepared me for going into the military.
You're in Oakland, California, in case you don't know it.
It was all fine and dandy. Everything was great. Until I went to see The Godfather, Ruination. You know, it just reminded me so much of home and the family that I really, really got homesick. And we walked out of the movie theater, and I told my wife, I said, it's time to go back. And there was the Michael Corleone character. There was, you know, it was just too much that I related to in the film. And being naive and rather stupid, you know, not knowing what it's really like. I mean, it's not like it isn't The Godfather. I mean, it's not that easy to walk up and just shoot somebody in the head on the street. You know, it's a very difficult thing to do. And, I mean, the first thing they had me do was rig a hand grenade in somebody's car. And I happened to have gone to school with this kid. And it was for something that 12 years earlier, he had broken my uncle's nose in a fight. And my uncle waited 12 years, and all that time, he said, we're going to get him, we're going to get him, we're going to get him. He didn't get killed. He got a broken leg or some stuff. About 8-9 months later, we saw him again, and I figured by this time maybe Nino had calmed down about it and got it out of his mind, because usually when you try and you miss, you figure, okay, we tried, we missed, leave the guy alone. Not so. It was my wife's birthday party, and he got me out of the birthday. We were all at the birthday party. Roy came over, DeMeo, and they said, guess who's on the corner on 85th Street? I said, who? I said, Vinnie Mook. I had to tell my wife, okay, we're leaving the birthday party, and we all got disguises on. And we went and this time just shot him in the street. And went over to Brooklyn Bridge and gave all our clothes away, the disguise clothes away to the bums, and went back to the party like nothing happened. Had the cake and handed out the presents. You see, when you get into that life, it's not like somebody just takes you and says, okay, bam, here, go out and do this. It's a gradual, again, ascent or descent, no matter who, depending on your opinion of it. It's gradual, you know. First I ran a car service, then I made a couple of pickups, then I did a little of this, then I did a little of that, and it just escalates and escalates, and you take on more and more, and you start feeling in here more and more like that's what I do for a living now. That's what I do for my family. And this was like a rite of passage. This is when, and I've heard it so often, and you know, I've never heard it in real street vernacular, but in the books and in the movies, that was making your bones.
Making your bones means doing a job when you want to go into the service. Got to make your bones. You got to show that you're a stand-up person. You got to show that you're going to perform. You're not going to back down. You're not going to start, I'm sorry, you know, like that. It won't cut. It won't hold water.
He says, look, Philip, he said, we have to kill Vince. And I says, okay. And around this time, Vince was starting to get a little suspicious. He felt like maybe my uncle was going to hurt him. And he told me around the hangout, he says, look, Philip, he said, no matter what happened, he says, I don't deserve to die. I said, well, Vince, ain't nobody going to hurt you. I said, well, you know, how could you even talk like that to me? I said, come on. I'm trying to relax him. I said, Vince, get some ice. Come on, we'll have a drink. So eventually, he walks over to the kitchen, he opens the refrigerator door to get the ice, and that's when I shoot him. He falls down, and my uncle listens to his heart. He says, shoot him again in the heart. And I put the gun on his chest, and I shot him again.
Phil Leonetti's hit on Vincent Falcone earns him the nickname Crazy Phil. He's proven his loyalty to the Bruno crime family.
Things are a lot quieter tonight on Snyder Street in South Philadelphia. Last night at this time and in front of this house, reputed mob boss Angelo Bruno was gunned down. Today, friends and relatives of Bruno paid their respects to his family. Bruno was coming back from dinner.
The hit on Don Angelo Bruno outside his home in 1980 was the beginning of a war. Before the war ends, 24 guys get whacked. The stakes are high. Control of the new casino rackets in Atlantic City. Phil Testa becomes boss, Uncle Nicky Scarfo, consigliere, and Phil Leonetti, a made man.
When I was made a member of the family, Phil Testa, the boss of the family at the time, called me into the center of the circle. He pointed to a gun and a knife he had on the table in front of him. He says, would you use this gun or this knife to help anybody here if they had a problem? I said, yes, I would. He picks my uncle to prick my finger to take the blood from it. It's a picture of a saint. And what I'm going to do, Philip, I want you to cup your hands, and as it's burning in your hands, I want you to juggle it and keep saying, may I burn like this saint if I betray my friends. And I want you to keep saying that and juggling it until it burns out, which I did. And when it burned out, Phil Testa put his hands over mine and they rubbed the ashes into my palms. And after that, I was part of the circle. I was a made member. It's a moment that makes you feel very powerful, very strong. It makes me feel I'm part of this family that we're all friendly. We're all brothers now. And we all help each other. If somebody has a problem, I felt very good about it.
But the family doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bloodline. You know, it's just the family. Everybody that's there is the family. When you take the oaths and when you get made, I mean, that comes ahead of your own blood family. It comes ahead of your kids. It comes ahead of your wife. You know, if your wife's dying in the kitchen and you need to perform a tracheotomy and they give you a call and say, come, she's got to find somebody else to do the tracheotomy because you got to go. I mean, that's the rules. They kill you. They retire you.
Boss Testa lasts less than a year. The night he gets blown up, the Little Italy restaurant takes the Testa burger off the menu. Little Nicky Scarfo is now the undisputed boss of Philadelphia. He hit the jackpot. Atlantic City's untold millions.
Atlantic City, June 1977. New Jersey Governor Brendan Byrne signed a law paving the way for casinos. Byrne told the mob to stay away.
Keep your filthy hands out of Atlantic City. Keep the hell out of our state.
But organized crime didn't. State police say the mob is increasingly active in Atlantic City. Police say the mob is also involved in businesses that provide the casinos with parking, food, liquor, and vending machines.
We had connection with Local 54, which was the waiters, waitresses, bartenders, the scullery, which was one of the largest unions in this area, in Atlantic City area. And we also had all the other unions in Atlantic City. The Teamsters, everybody was with us. We could have told every union to strike, stop delivering the trash, stop picking up the trash, no deliveries, no food, no nothing. We could have closed everybody down, but we don't want to do that. We don't cause no problems. Everything was working out smoothly. We were making a lot of money, my uncle, and it worked out good.
It had been working out good for a long time. Since the 30s, the mob's used its muscle to get a piece of organized labor. By the early 60s, the mob has a piece of almost every union in America. But it took a bitter feud between Bobby Kennedy and Teamster boss Jimmy Hoffa to expose the mob's connections inside the unions. The unions, with their millions of dues-paying members and billion-dollar pension funds, were a key source of mob money and power. Kennedy holds Hoffa responsible.
There is no question about Hoffman. Don't you say that either. You said that enough around this country, and I want the American press to know that I resent the fact. And don't use this as a sounding board for headlines for that purpose. And I appeal to the chair that be taken out of
In the 20s and 30s, the management was hiring the goons to cross the picket lines and beating those fellas unmercifully. There came a time where Jimmy Hoffa realized that without the help of the mob, he could never be successful. And that's where he recruited the mob. And the mob was very happy to help because they would give him an inside track to the unions. And without them, he couldn't manage. And they used him and he used them.
Mr. Hoffa, you've got people in Detroit, at least 15 who have a police record. You've got Joey Glinto in Chicago. I say you're not tough enough to get rid of these people now.
It's his dream to have a pension fund. And that's how he would reward them for their assistance in organizing these various businesses and factories and plants and everything else, that they would have access to the pension fund and be able to obtain loans for themselves and their friends.
If you took control of a labor union, you could see that you would be voted generous salaries, generous perks, an automobile, expense account, and so on. Plus, you can make money selling labor peace.
Guys were picketing a place that was a friend of ours or somebody, we would be down and straighten them out and move them off. We'll call them to the side and say, what are you doing? They said, well, we're sent down by our unions. We said, well, you'd like to leave here tonight and go home to your families. I mean, your alternatives are this or that. And most of them did. There's always a couple of stubborn people that, you had to lock horns with. So we locked horns with them. We didn't kill anybody, but we broke a few heads.
We used to go to the owners of these businesses and said, look, we're going to try and organize your business. We're going to take care of your hospitalization for your people. We're going to give them a little bit of benefits, and you got to throw them a bone. Instead of giving them $2.50 an hour, give them $3 an hour. Oh, no, I can't. No. You don't understand. You're going to give them $3 an hour because we're going to collect dues from them. If we collect dues from them, you, in turn, are going to get a piece of the action. So the lousy quarter or 50 cents an hour more you're going to throw in their pockets, you're going to get back. They never got back, of course. I mean, once we take something, once we grab somebody's throat, we never release the throat.
Hey, Chuck, I'm going to tell you something. You have now $200 in my hand tomorrow. You understand me? Huh? You have it here by 6 o'clock tomorrow night, or believe me when I tell you this, and I promise you this, I'll break every bone in your body before I go to jail.
They have what law enforcement doesn't. They have the fear of God and the fear of that 22 behind your ear. And they could make that contract almost anywhere in the world by picking up a phone and saying, do we have anybody in Rome, in Germany, in Munich, in Paris to go see you? I want his kneecaps boiled, baked, or fried within 24 hours. They have the power to do that. We're not animals. We do what we got to do. We're not the nicest people in the world, but that's part of the business. And it is business.
If you're building a big building and losing money, is it easier to pay off a gangster and straighten out a problem? You bet it is.
If you have a Gambino crime family, if you have an organized crime family coming at you, they're powerless. What's a man going to do?
You pick up the phone, you call some wise guy who is, in the union, and you say, hey, these guys are breaking my chops over issue X. And that guy says, leave me $20,000 in a brown paper bag, and I'll take care of that tomorrow. That means that your project doesn't lose $250,000 a day for the next 30 days while you haggle with the union. Is it wrong? Well, of course it's wrong, because the union is selling out the very men that pay their dues to be in it.
I worked in Madison Square Garden. The only history of the ever being closed down was due to us. They'd never been closed down, Madison Square Garden. How long are they in existence now? I don't know. 100 years? I don't know. So we just severed all the electric cables in the building, and nobody could work. We went in and closed them down. Why? Because we wanted more money. Not just more money. We wanted more no-show jobs. So we closed them down until he gave it to us. I mean, I worked there for 7 years. I think I showed up 2.5 years. And I got paid every week, all this money. I got paid not to come there, create a problem. He got to that point.
I didn't steal cars. They didn't steal cars. You pay people to steal. You pay kids. You know, you pay them like $500 a car. They do 5-6 cars a night. They make $3,000 a night. They do that 5 nights a week. They're making 15-20 grand a week. And then the cars get tagged, change all the numbers, phony shipping documents, ship them out of the country. Or they stay here and they go in the chop shops, sell the parts. But it was our crew took it to the multi-million-dollar level. You know, it was a multi-million-dollar operation.
Juice, which didn't come off the top. You never touched the principal. 5 years from now, you can pay me $50 a week for the next 5 years. In 5 years, you still owed me $1,000.
Years ago, it used to be 1.5 points. Now it's 5.5 points, 6 points, 7 points. It varies depending on the amount. It works out anywhere between 300 to 400% a year. No. That's why they call them loan sharks. Otherwise, they would call them businessmen.
A lot of desperate people on the West Side. Most of them are trying to work hard for a living. They can't afford it. They like to do a little betting, or they like to take the wife out to dinner, or they have a misfortune with the children at home. I mean, we actually dwelled on our own people. I mean, we actually took advantage of all of them. They couldn't go outside the neighborhood. You know, the Guineas wouldn't give them the money. They didn't know them. We'd give it to them. And we'd make it sound like we were doing them a favor. And they believed we were actually destroying them.
And they were going to I believe it was a police department in Nebraska. And a couple of friends of mine hijacked the truck. And they didn't have any place to put these guns. So I said, yeah, sure, you can leave them in my house as long as you get them out in the morning. My wife walked into the living room, and all over the floor was just guns. And she said, what are you guys up to today? I said nothing. We said, we're just going to keep these here overnight. They'll be out in the morning. She got me in the kitchen. She says, why are you doing this to me? She says, I don't want to sleep. How many guns are there? I said, it's like 400, 500 of them. She says, I don't want to sleep with 400, 500 stolen guns in my house. And we kept them overnight, but I kept my word. We had them out in the morning. And then the big problem was distribution. Because Nino came up with a real good idea. He says, if we start selling these all over the city, they're going to get into the hands of people that we don't want. You know, they'll be getting used on us. So we had to be very select about who we were giving them to. So now you know what it's like to try and sell all these guns all around the city? You know? So what I did was I went up to Harlem and sold them to the black guys up there. You know, I knew some big-time dope dealers up there, Nicky Barnes' crew. And I figured we never go to war with them. So I dumped like 100 of them up there to Gene Green, who was one of Nicky's lieutenants. And that's basically how we got rid of them. I got rid of them some more to the Cubans. But I don't think we sold any to Italians except the ones that were in our family, that we could trust in our family. You know, and you really can't trust them either. You know, that's who gets you. Who's going to set you up other than them? You know, it's a scary thought, but what we did was everybody in the crew got 3 or 4 to keep.
10, 40 hours. Subject in the middle has taken numerous bets today from unknown people.
It's this guy and thousands of bookies like him who bring in more dough with less risk than all the stolen guns, hot cars, and loan sharking combined. The mob's cut from illegal gambling is only 10%, but it's 10% of a $40 billion business. More than enough to keep bookies, lawyers, and crooked cops fat and happy. It's the grease that keeps organized crime running. But organized crime is about to become disorganized. The drug business is going to change everything.
The purpose of my coming to the Department of Justice today in this great hall is to sign the organized crime bill. I think that we can say that we shall now be able to launch a total war against organized crime, and we will win this war.
Nixon declares the nation's first war on drugs, asking Congress for $60 million. By that time, mob guys carried that much around in a suitcase.
05 hours, August 14th, 1972. These are the subjects that were involved in this afternoon's transaction in the middle of the screen. To the left is Thomas Mo Lantini.
In the early 70s, cops get a new toy. A video camera with a night scope. The stars of their first production, young mobsters operating an open-air drug market in East Harlem.
You will see the man in the flower shirt carrying here a white plastic bag containing a white substance, obviously blatantly open on the street.
Even for narcs who'd seen it all, these tapes are real eye-openers.
Takes some money out of his pocket, begins counting it, and gives a portion of that money to the individual standing on the left side of the screen.
Bookies had been doing their thing on the street for years. Drug dealers, like Sal Bilella, seen here holding a pound of heroin, thought they could do the same. They're wrong. And there are fewer and fewer old-style bosses to set them right.
Gambino, head of the most powerful crime family in the country, died of a heart attack. As the so-called boss of bosses of Manhattan, he attempted to steer the families away from drug trafficking, believing that narcotics convictions would invite unwanted infiltrations of the federal government. His death could result in war between the factions in the family.
When Carlo Gambino died, if I'd been asked to place a $10 wager as to who would be his successor, I would have put the $10 on the man who was his underboss, Agnello Della Croce. Tough man. Of all the gangsters that I met personally, and I met dozens of them in all of my years, there are only two who, when I looked them straight in the eye, I decided I wouldn't want them to be really personally mad at me. Agnello Della Croce was one, and Carmine Galenti was the other. They had bad eyes. I mean, they had the eyes of killers.
Della Croce runs the best crew in the mob. His skipper, the toughest street fighter in New York, young John Gotti. Against Gotti's wishes, some of his young Turks risk dipping into drugs. Their greed overcomes their loyalty. It's a risk that Carlo Gambino's brother-in-law, Big Paulie Castellano, also opposes.
After Carlo died, there was two factions of the family. There was the Brooklyn faction, which was basically headed by Paul Castellano. And there was the Manhattan faction, which was headed by Agnello Della Croce. One of those two were going to be boss of the family. It was a very tense time because that is always when it's very ripe for war within the families. Nino spoke to me in the afternoon. He said, "We're going to make Paulie tonight." So I went to Gemini and I picked up a package which turned out to be an M2 carbine. Went home and assembled it, and Nino said that the Manhattan faction would be coming to the house about 7:30, and that I was to go upstairs in my living room window, which overlooked the entranceway to his apartment downstairs and the driveway. And he said, "There's supposed to be no guns at the meeting." He says, "But I'm taping a pistol under the table." He says, "If anything goes wrong and you hear any shooting downstairs," he says, "just kill everybody that comes out of the house." And about 7 o'clock, Paul and Tommy Bellotti came with Joe Gallo. He was the consigliere to the family. And about 7:15, the Manhattan faction came, and they walked in, and I clicked the safety off. And probably within 15-20 minutes, the Manhattan faction left. I put the safety back on, and then Paulie and Tommy and Joe Gallo left. And about a minute after that, Nino knocked on my door, and I went downstairs, and he said, Paulie's the new boss.
Big Paulie Castellano begins a 9-year rule. Della Croce and Gaggi are not happy. They feel Paulie spends too much time with bankers and businessmen, not enough time on the street. But Paulie's big problem comes when a bunch of Irish nut jobs start whacking people and bring down the heat from the New York DA.
Presently, we have under investigation 28 murders that they've committed. In 5 of those murders, defendants have been charged, but there are another 23 that are open cases.
Everybody's getting the heat. The murders weren't even committed by the Gambino crew, or even by Italians. They're the work of an Irish gang from Manhattan's West Side, the Westies.
They thought we were an army. They didn't know there was a dozen of us. I mean, that's all we were. There was a few of us. But we were brazen kids, and we didn't care, you know. These guys ran around, you know, they talked about being wise guys, but they snuck up on you. I mean, we did it right in your face. We didn't care. We'd come to your house in the day or the night, or it didn't matter. If we had a problem with you, we did it immediately. You know, they laid back. So I guess our reputation got out in front of us because we had a lot of moxie.
According to the press, the Westies were the bottom of the crime barrel. They'd do anything. An assortment of wild men, drunks, and druggies. But their leader, Jimmy Coonan, wants more. He wants to hang around with the big guys.
One of my biggest arguments was Jimmy's that he had to stop killing people. I said, we can't collect money from dead people. He says, yeah, but you don't understand. He said, we can't go to the Guineas and not have a record. You know, we got to have a track record of bodies. He said, this is impressive to these guys.
Coonan killed one guy too many. A big-time loan shark for the Gambino family who loaned $40,000 to one of Coonan's men. The loan shark's name? Charles Ruby Stein.
He didn't have any young Italian tough guys to go up and talk to the Westies, and he very stupidly went himself to 11th Avenue on 53rd Street somewhere, and the Westies decided to erase the debt by erasing Charles Ruby Stein.
He was dragged to the back where they cut his head off arms and cut open the torso so hopefully it wouldn't float, which was Jimmy's mistake. He was still in the learning stages in them days because the torso did float up. I met him on the Jersey Turnpike, and he was very pissed off at himself because he forgot to puncture the lungs.
After nearly 3 months of medical detective work, they've identified 6 of the 7 bodies, apparent victims in a gangland hit parade. The best known among them was Ruby Stein, age 62, described by police as the biggest loan shark in this area. We've identified 6 bodies.
6 out of 7 have been positively identified.
And are you certain that these people are from the underworld?
Well, there's no other conclusion to draw from it, since most of these people not only had multiple bullet wounds, but were wrapped up and tied and placed in cardboard boxes, shipping boxes, and other compartments.
He said, now we got a real problem. Because Ruby Stein was the front runner for the crime families, investing their monies. And they were going to know it came from us, you know.
Big Paul Castellano demands a sit-down with Coonan at Tommaso's restaurant. He wants to talk about the Stein murder. To keep the heat off the mob, he has to get the Westies under control.
They had to be controlled. Somebody had to control them. So Roy DeMeo and Danny Grillo had a good in with the Westies, and they set up a meeting. And at the time, Jimmy Coonan, who was the head of the Westies, he wanted to be a wise guy. He wanted to be like an Italian. So it wasn't too hard to get him to go for it then. The rest of the Westies weren't really crazy about it, but they went along with what Jimmy said.
My argument with Jimmy was I didn't want to be by these people. I was taught by my father, by my uncles, if you're not one of them, you can't become one of them. You got to be a blue blood, you know, and I'm a Mick. There was no getting around that, you know. So, and I really believed that. I really believed that. And I was doing not bad with my own group. Why step out, you know? I didn't want to be a pinky ring person.
The guys from the West Side don't like the Italians in general. Not because they're Italian, because they're mob guys.
The meeting was set up by them, but we had an inside person at this meeting. And this kid was eyeballing in this place. And if they saw Jimmy be taken out of the room, or Mickey, our instructions were to come out and just kill everybody that's there. No matter who was there, everyone was to die in the restaurant. But lucky for Jimmy, it didn't happen, because if they would have called, I mean, we were all sitting in the house smoking grass, snorting cocaine. We were having a good old time. It was like a family reunion, so we had a big party. If they would have called, they probably wouldn't have answered the phone. I mean, we were all so stoned at the time. That's the truth. I mean, it's sad, but it's true.
Now, years ago, Carlo Gambino would not have had anything to do with a drug addict whatsoever. Now his successor is farming out violence to drug addicts, a very unwise move.
Castellano doesn't understand the street. He doesn't understand that junkies could care less about the mob's code of loyalty. They just want to get high.
That began to creep into organized crime and only widen was the fact that the older men who had made many millions had a tendency to say, let's stay away from narcotics. It's bad publicity, it's bad news, stay away from it.
But my uncle was always concerned about how the people in the Genovese family would feel about that. He knew they were dead against it, and he always made sure nobody in our family fooled with drugs. He put the rule down. He says, you can shake people down, which we shook big drug dealers down for big money. But you cannot steal the drugs and sell them. We could steal the money, he told them, but not the drugs.
The older guys, what we refer to as the Mustache Pete's, that school is dead now because it used to be very disciplined. They stuck to the rules. They were very cheap. I mean, they had a saying, keep them down, keep them hungry, and, they'll keep on working for you. And the drug business has opened up a whole new horizon.
In the generation gap, the young guys are saying, sure, they've made all their money, and they're going to deny us a chance to catch up to them. That's why they want us to stay away from narcotics. So while that was a general rule, a lot of the young men decided to violate it.
For good reason. Money. Drugs are making other people rich. The rules are working great for the bosses, not for the guys on the street.
I just wasn't getting enough money to survive I had another child on the way. I had 2 kids, and he was paying me like $250 a week, And we're talking about you putting hand grenades in people's cars and running around gunning down people in the street for $250 a week.
I had grandmothers, ladies with blue hair, driving big electric 225 Buicks with 800 pounds of pot in it, with Monroe load levelers on it, spray painted so the state police wouldn't see it, delivering them to my door. And I'd give her an envelope for $500 or $1,500, whatever the agreement, and they would leave. I mean, this was like 3 times a week. These were grandmothers. These were people that I'd never seen again, thank God, but I know there was somebody's grandmother. They had nets on their head. I mean, they were looking over the steering wheel. The cops never stopped them. We used to bring them up and down the turnpikes all the time like that. You want the car? You say unload it. You could take the car with you. We didn't even want the cars. I wound up opening the damn car lot. I had so many cars from juggling smugs up. Was giving cars away with Christmas presents. And you asked me, does it affect everybody? Everybody was affected in making the money. Now that the monster's here, nobody wants to pay for it. But it's here. Now what do you do with it?
We've stopped America's free fall into the drug pit. We're getting our footing to climb out.
Far from climbing out, the mob's sinking fast. Mobsters are not only selling dope, they're shooting. Forget discipline, forget restraint, forget loyalty. For this kind of dough, people will do anything.
As things start evolving and changing and people start dealing with drugs, it changed. It's not like it was in the old days.
I would stay up 3-4 days at a time, doing cocaine, not eating, drinking Jack Daniels, and doing robberies.
I was snorting the same cocaine that I was selling and doing the same quaaludes.
It gets pretty hairy because you start to hallucinate.
And it got worse with the bodies. As the bodies came, I mean, the cocaine got worse.
Guns become a very big part of your life. You're always with guns and ready to shoot.
Where I would carry a vial, and I was carrying around ounces, you know, I mean, constantly loaded, you know, constantly stowed drinking, which destroyed the West Side by far. I mean, all of them became drug addicts.
The more drugs you do, the worse it gets.
But they would kill people and get high, you know, or get high and kill people, whatever they did. It became too fast. Getting chased out of the waters outside of Miami. I mean, I was chased by helicopters. We jumped out of boats. I mean, it was horrendous stuff, you know. But it was kind of like action-packed, so it was kind of fun at the same time. You know, I really pumped you up, you know. And at the end of the day, you said, holy, man, a helicopter guy was chasing us, you know what I mean? Frogmen and boats. And I felt like the movie Miami Vice after a while. I was starting to live that life.
Yeah, it's good to watch, but when you're involved with it and you have to go out and pull that trigger and blow somebody's brains out, that's not much glamour there. Or you're the guy that gets indicted and goes to jail. They could turn the channel off and watch a different show when the person goes to jail or gets the electric chair. But you're the guy that has to go through it. You're the guy that lives it. A lot of guys, when we start shaking down drug dealers and bookmakers and loan sharks, come right to the hangout, say, look, they would say, I'm going into business. Here, I want to start paying. I don't want no problems from you guys. That's how scared they were of us, because we were killing everybody. Everybody was being killed, no matter who they were.
Everybody had contracts on everybody in the group at the time. They were going to kill me, they were going to kill him, they were going to kill each other. They started killing each other. You know, I mean, it's got really nuts.
You walked in, you got shot in the head with a silencer. Somebody wrapped a towel around your head to stop the blood from going all over the place. Chris would jump out in his underwear because he didn't like to get his clothes dirty, and he'd stab you in the heart to stop the heart from pumping so the blood would stop. Then you were hung upside down in the shower. Neck was cut, starting in the back, all the way around here. And you bleed in the shower for about 40 minutes. And then they had pool tarpaulins and regular butcher kits with the saws that butcher used, the hatchets. You know, and they had it down to a science. Unless they wanted you found. And they didn't care who it was. You know, it got to a point where they didn't care who they killed. You had 5 or 6 serial killers in one crew. And these were legitimate serial killers. I'm talking, you know, 100 people apiece. And that kind of gets to you after a while, because every time you can walk in there to collect the money, you say, I wonder if I'm going to walk out of here tonight.
I sat in the tub for 4 hours, stark naked, with 2 guys with silencers pointed in my face with hoods on. It was Jimmy Coon and Eddie Kaminsky. And I asked him, what did I do to deserve this? I mean, I'm earning you money. He says, no, it's nothing personal. It's not you. He says, we're waiting for Patty Dugan to come.
And then all the people in our own crew started to disappear. You know, it wasn't like when they ran out of people to kill, they started killing each other. So it was just, it got too insane.
I mean, there was women walking in the street waiting for their husbands to come home that weren't coming home no more, you know? And that wasn't easy to deal with. It used to disturb me to see Jimmy Coon pick his babies up and hold them and play with them. And I used to look at him and say, how can this guy, he just carried somebody's in his hand or his head in his hand, and here he is playing with his kids. I mean, how do you live with that? I couldn't live with that. I refused to live with that. And that was my cop out to drugs. You learn to escape. What's the downfall? Sure. But how can a sane person, supposedly sane person, go and kill somebody and not be stoned or not go get drunk? I mean, how do you live with the fact that you severed somebody's head off? I mean, I saw them cut a man's head off. But it happened so fast, and I saw the look in Jimmy Coonan's face. I knew my days were numbered. He was not going to allow me to go on and have this over his head. Conan instructed Mickey, Billy's got to go, I want him out. So they put a contract on the street on me.
That I was accused of dealing heroin, and in our family, that's a death sentence. And on the way home, Nino told me, he says, you know, if you weren't my nephew, they would have found you in the street already. And he says, you just keep on messing up. And he just gave me that look, like you just keep on. And I had no intentions of not keeping on messing up, because I was going to go out and make my own money. And at that time, I figured either I stay and I'll last a few more months and then they're going to, kill me, or I take off and I go.
I had made peace with the fact I was dying anyway, but I made peace with that fact early in life, when I became the criminal and the drug dealer and the burglar, and it was obvious I wasn't going to live long, because we were dealing this dead man's hand. I mean, everyone around me was dying.
It got too insane.
It's got really nuts.
Mob guys, dead. Discipline, dead. Loyalty, dead. Nobody's safe anymore.
He was also a smart man. That's why he lived to the age of 92. He used to say, never be the guy in the chair. Be the guy behind the guy in the chair. Because someone's going to whisper in your ear one day. And the whisper may say, whack the guy, but give you a piece. Was a big man. He got whacked.
This is the boss of the largest crime family in the United States. And this is the biggest mob hit in decades. Somebody, to pull that off, had to make a major, major move. Someone took me on the side that night and said, listen, remembered his name, John Gaggi. He didn't even say it right. He didn't say Gotti. He said, John Gaggi. John Gotti bursts onto the scene. He looks like Al Capone. He dresses like a gangster from the movies. He talks like a gangster from the movies. And there's none of this, my client is old and sick stuff. His lawyer says, this case is garbage, we're gonna fight it, and we welcome the day in court.
Gotti, he likes the publicity. He liked it. He thrives on it. But also, it's the Cosa Nostra. That he's very serious about the Cosa Nostra. He wants to go out as the boss of the Cosa Nostra. Well, he's like my uncle. They're old-fashioned. They're like dinosaurs. They want to go out as being members, or the boss, as he is, of the Cosa Nostra. That's how they want to die. That's the way they want people to remember them by, because that's how they are,
We watched this character burst on the scene out of a very dramatic murder. The bumping off of Paul Castellano. He was too good to be true. We knew right away that the public would want plenty of this guy, and we started to serve it up as fast as possible.
With respect to the charge of assault in the second degree, do you find the defendant, John Gotti, guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Gotti's the master of escape. 3 times he beats the government. He's called the Teflon Don. Nothing sticks to him. But even Gotti's days are numbered, thanks to a little-known federal law called RICO, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organization Act. Prosecutors love it. They can put a guy away forever. Facing life in the joint, even loyal wise guys begin to cooperate. They tell all. In mob circles, they call it flipping.
I witnessed a murder. And the murder I witnessed, I knew that day forward, my life had ended. And everybody involved in that is either now dead, or dead doing life, or in the witness protection program.
I tell you, what gave me the strength to call the government, though, is when my cousin Mark hung himself. Because after that, I said, hell with this stuff. I can't take it anymore. I'm worried about my son, because my son was best friends with Mark Scarfo. The kid wanted to be a normal kid, but around our family, you can't be normal growing up. You have to live the way his father wanted him to live. 17-year-old kid. Didn't want him to play sports in school. Say, you're a jerk. Don't you play sports in school? Mark wanted to work for somebody, like delivering bread. No, you ain't working for nobody that degrades him. He wanted him to be a La Cosa Nostra member before he grew up. The kid wanted to be a kid first. He didn't want to get involved with this. He didn't want this. He wanted to be a normal kid. So one day, he went into the bathroom of my office and hung himself, like out of the clear blue sky, like just like that. Didn't show no signs of anything being wrong, or that was it. That's how he held everything inside, this kid. He went into the bathroom of my office and hung himself. I read it, I guess that's the only way to say it. I informed, I testified for the government. I made an agreement with the government to cooperate. If they help my family, if they moved my family and got my son situated, got him out of that life, and moved him somewhere so I could get his life back on track.
Once they found out I was in jail, and Gene Green told me, he says, word's out that the Dagos are going to whack you while you're in here. And I said, they said, you want us to help? I said, no. I said, this is my, I know what I got to do now. And that's when I made a phone call.
Dominick got arrested, and we made an offer to him that he didn't refuse. And from that point on, he became our strongest witness.
In the trial, they brought everybody. They brought my grandmother, was 93, on crutches. They brought her into the courtroom. You know, they'll do anything to rattle you. You know, and you got to sit there and look at all these people. And it was, like I said, I do 3 more tours in Vietnam before I go through that again. You know, no doubt in my mind.
Nobody's exposed the inside workings of the Gambino family like Dominick Montiglio. His testimony puts his uncle Nino and a dozen of Nino's top guys away forever. Mickey Featherstone and Billy Beattie's testimony put an end to the Westies. Jimmy Coonan and his crew get 75 years in the can with no chance for parole. Philip Leonetti testifies about 10 mob hits and sends his uncle, Little Nicky Scarfo, to prison for life. Scarfo's capos and foot soldiers go down with him. That's only the beginning. Next to fall, the big boss himself.
Let him go where he's got to go. To me, that don't sound like him. Unless you don't know Sal's around.
July 5th, 1985. The FBI plants a bug in the Ravenite Social Club, John Gotti's hangout, the place he does all his business. Gotti himself is recorded saying, these tapes, they're gonna get everybody. Gotti should have been a fortune teller.
But forget about that. But he was at the wedding. Oh, did you ever hear? Yes. Did you ever hear? He spent the whole night with me.
The feds record 28,000 conversations in which Gotti is heard bad-mouthing everybody, including his underboss, Sammy the Bull Gravano. It's mind-boggling. Gotti talks too much. Listening to the tape, Sammy the Bull sees his days are numbered. Rather than go down with Gotti, Sammy flips. The biggest defection in mob history.
It was absolutely incredible. These capos and soldiers hearing themselves being discussed by John Gotti, by Sam Gravano, by Frankie Locks. They heard their own voices on tapes coming through the conversations, and they saw the videotapes of the meetings and everything, and then Sammy Gravano got on the stand and told the whole story. Sammy the Bull Gravano, the underboss of the largest crime family, flips. When the underboss flips, it's not like any other member of the family flipping.
From 1985 to 1991, Sammy had access to everything legitimate and illegitimate in the Gambino family.
He has the broadest and most intricate picture of all of their operations, all of their money, all of their crimes, what murders were authorized and by whom and for why.
So when he turned, it was a gold mine. And to this day, Sammy's making more cases because he sat down with all the other bosses of the other 5 families. Matter of fact, not only the 5 families with Jersey, John Riggy in Jersey, with the Bruno family, with Scarfo, and so I mean, he not only destroyed his family, but he took a piece out of almost every other family.
Tapper John Gotti, the Teflon Don, guilty on all charges, capped by the murder of Paul Castellano. Sammy's betrayal sends his boss away for life.
The Teflon is gone, the Don is covered with Velcro, and every charge in the indictment stuck, to the credit of the United States Attorney's Office and its prosecution team. The mob, as we have known it in New York City and in the United States, is on the way out.
Who gets you as your best friends? You know, there's certain people you could trust that you just go so far back with, and you really can't trust them either.
Maybe you have to go through this to really understand it. Maybe, and just hope you're lucky enough to live through, to understand, to make a decision to get out of it. Because it's not like what you see in The Godfather, the respect and all that, and everybody's a good guy, and the drug dealer's the bad guy in it, and yeah, it's good they killed the drug dealer. It's not that way. It's not clear cut like that. There's so much treachery with everybody. It's just, if you don't get killed, it takes a toll on you mentally, that it wears you down.
But the fact that I'm still sitting here today bewilders me. You know, I don't know why. I'm a survivor, obviously, but I didn't think I'd get this far. I mean, the money that I made through drugs and racketeering, I should have boxes of it, you know? But as quick as you made it, you gave it up. I mean, we gave it to women, you paid rents, you bought things, it didn't matter, because you didn't think you were going to be around that long. I personally didn't.
So eventually, what happened was going to happen. It's the inevitable. You're going to die, or you're going to go to jail. I mean, those are two constants on the street.
I took a criminal oath to these people, to the people I thought were honest, that wouldn't stab you in the back, that wouldn't double-cross you or try to kill you to get ahead of you. That's the oath I took. I didn't take an oath to these people who were treacherous and evil people. I didn't take that oath.
I don't mind being able to sit down and say I done it, you know. I mean, I don't mind that. I wish I'd gone a different direction, because I might have been something really, I might have done something good, some real good. Because I've got a lot of smarts, you know, and I just didn't zoom them in the right way, you know. I'm a pretty talented guy.
You're not dead yet, you know.
No, I'm not, and it's not over for me. But look at all the years I wasted, you know. Look at all the years I wasted, and I wasted the biggest part of my life. But who knows? Who knows?
Well, when he was 90 years old, he was laying in bed, and I said to him, Papa, I said, why the hell are you so hard on us? I can't understand it. I mean, yeah. He says, you afraid of anybody? I said, no, Pop. He says, can you almost beat the out of anybody? Yes, Pop. He says, can you kill almost anybody? I said, yeah, Pop. He says, I did my job. Now get the hell out of my room. He says, I'm building men. He says, I'm not building pussies. I'm not building faggots. He says, I want you guys to be men, because without manlyhood, you're not going to be home. Also, it shows weakness to have a heart. You can't have a heart in this business. Too expensive.